Welcome back to episode 33 on Scratching the Surface. Today I will be doing something a little bit different than the typical review format. I'm going to instead dive into the world of Nosferatu, the story, the characters, and this story consists of three different movies that are all connected in different ways, and I'll talk about each of them briefly, while also just talking about things I do like and don't like, and hopefully can get you excited about the upcoming film from Robert Eggers, which will be coming out on Christmas Day. I do think the hype is real for this movie that's coming out from Eggers. I respect Eggers as a director, and I think he's going to give us something truly magnificent on Christmas Day. As always, check us out at scratchingthesurface100.com. You can read our monthly article blogs. You can keep up to date on future episodes, and you can leave and write your own horror movie reviews. We are expanding that review database. It is totally legit and functional. I have about 100 movies on there so far, with goals to maybe add 1,000 more in the next couple of years. So it does take time. Bear with me, but I'm very proud of that. So check it out, scratchingthesurface100.com. Nosferatu. I think we all know where this begins. If you haven't seen SpongeBob before, I don't know how you haven't, but most people know of Nosferatu, at least the image of him from that episode, from that show. But we go back to 1922 for this first film, Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror. This is from director F.W. Murnau, who was renowned back in the 20s for several films. He did great work with a lot of the films he did. And if we look at the period that this film came out, we're looking post-World War I, coming right off of the heels of that. So there is a lot of darkness in Germany at this time. There's a lot of death, a lot of dying, a lot of pain within Germany. And really, this is where the expressionist movement was started in Germany. In terms of expressionist filmmaking, absolutely started in Germany. We saw Robert Wien do the similar type of expressionistic storytelling with The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So we see that heavily here as well in Nosferatu. Max Schreck plays the infamous Count Orlok, who is widely recognized across the globe for his haunting imagery and his great performance. And if we look at the story itself of Count Orlok, of Nosferatu, it was adapted from Bram Stoker's novel in 1897, Dracula. He was dead by the time this movie was made and released, but there was certainly issues from his widow, his wife. She did not like what Murnau and Prana Films did with this film and this story. It is essentially an adaptation of that novel, and they did it without the legal right to do so. So she sued. She was successful. So the court did order all of the films of Nosferatu to be destroyed. And we obviously know today that some of them did survive. We can find this movie free for streaming on Tubi, and I'm sure on other streaming services as well. But she was successful. Prana Films basically declared bankruptcy, and that's how it went. But the story was still used, and the movie was made. They changed a few names, they changed a few locations, but otherwise it's tit for tat, the same type of story as Dracula. I think the key difference, though, is the character of Nosferatu. I think a lot of people would agree. Dracula, we have a suave, seductive count, whereas in Nosferatu, we have a more animalistic, awkward, reclusive type of vampire that makes you uneasy. With Dracula, Bela Lugosi's role in 1931 from Todd Browning, I didn't feel unease with that Dracula. With this one, I did. There is an uncanny valley look to the Count. His ears are too big. His nose is much too long. His eyebrows are way too bushy. His big balding head, his long claw-like fingernails. He just makes you feel anxious and nervous and fearful for what is going to happen to the people on screen and for what you're about to witness as well. So this character is extremely, extremely effective in this first Nosferatu film. And it's one of the reasons I do hold the film fairly high. Is it the greatest film of all time? Absolutely not. It doesn't look quite as good nowadays. The age does definitely show, and that does take away from some of the viewing experience. But I still think it's a good movie. I think it's worth your time, and it's a must watch for any horror movie fan that wants to kind of dive into this story. You have to watch it. You just have to. But the story itself, I'll kind of summarize here. It's about a man named Hutter who is an estate agent, and he's sent out to Transylvania to speak with Nosferatu, the Count Orlok, to set up a potential purchase for a house. And Nosferatu notices that his wife, Hutter's wife, Ellen, is quite a beautiful woman. And he decides, I want to get next to this woman. I want to buy that house near you guys. So once the purchase is completed, Nosferatu goes by ship to move into his new home. And with him, he brings the plague. This is analogous to the bubonic plague. He has a bunch of rats on the ship. He's bringing impending death. It's the same thing as the plague with the rats that were carried on the ship through the Black Sea. So I love that tie-in. I think that's really, really haunting to think about. And that's why I also love this final act of Nosferatu, having that impending death, having that worry, that anxiety. Those types of things really come into play here. And we start to see the town rally together towards the end of the movie, similar to what we see in Frankenstein. They rally together to take down Nosferatu. In the end, we have an ending where Nosferatu is killed by sunlight before he is able to get to Ellen, Hutter's wife. And that's all we have. The film itself is beautiful to look at. The imagery is extremely haunting, well shot. Everything was done in the dark. So most of the interior and exterior shots were all done during the nighttime. This was to ensure they could pick up available light. They could also emphasize the shadows that they were trying to pick up on their picture. All of that is really impressive. And Murnau was clearly ahead of his time as a director making this film. One of the better ones ever made in the horror genre. And there's a reason why it's so looked back on in a positive light. We have that film. We then see Werner Herzog's remake in 1979. This is one of my favorite movies in the horror genre. It just is. It heightens everything from the original Nosferatu. It makes it better. It makes it bigger. Everything is just phenomenal from the director. Klaus Kinski's take on the vampire is awesome as well. I think he does a great job. He's very convincing. He's more saturnine. He's more glum, and you feel that. There's a sadness in a way. Herzog said he wanted to give a count that you could sympathize a little more for. We didn't have that in Murnau's take, but in Herzog's, I certainly felt that. This guy, this vampire, lives in lonely isolation for centuries. He is repressed sexually, and he's also repressed just socially. He can't fucking talk to anybody, because if he does, he's going to want to kill him. And it's a sad thing, and you feel that a little bit with him. We feel that repression in some ways, just obviously not just sexually, but in different ways. We are repressed. We are repressed in different ways. And I think you sympathize a little bit with the Count. In this version, mostly everything is the same. The names of the characters are slightly different. I think Hutter is Harker, and then I think Ellen is Lucy. The names of the locations change a little bit as well. That's about the only differences. Everything else is pretty much shot for shot for the most part. And there's just a few really, really spine-tingling scenes. I think early in the first act, maybe the back of the first act, there's a really just spine-tingling moment where Nosferatu, his desires take over, and he is going for Harker. It's their first true encounter, and it just really drives home. And the moment I saw that scene, I was hooked for the rest of this remake. And the build up to Pernstein Castle in the first 10 minutes of the film is beautiful, breathtaking, amazing soundtrack in the background. The mountains are just absolutely magnificent. So that right there keeps you drawn in from the get-go, and everything plays out about the same. The only difference at the end is that Harker does end up turning into a vampire and rides off by horse. And that's how we end the film. He's got work to do. He's got vampire work to do. So that's the remake. I think an incredible film, one of the best of all time. And I think it builds upon what the predecessor had done and makes it better in nearly every single way. I truly do think that. And then we have in 2000, The Shadow of the Vampire from director Elias Mitraj. This one stars Willem Dafoe as the Count and then John Malkovich as F.W. Murnau. So this one is actually more of a look on the actual characters. This is obviously they play with the story a little bit. They make it into their own fictional story, but they are portraying characters that were actually playing those roles in the 1922 version. So that's kind of cool. We actually see a little bit of trueness in terms of how the movie was made. Everything else in terms of the character motivations and actions are completely made up. They actually give us a take on Nosferatu as being a real vampire in terms of the actor. So Max Schreck is portrayed in this movie as an actual real-life vampire. F.W. Murnau finds him in the castle that they're going to shoot at, and he tells him, hey, do you want to be in my film as a vampire? And we see Max Schreck, Willem Dafoe in this film, coming across as an actual vampire with these urges and desires that he cannot maintain and contain. So that's really neat to see. And it actually gets you wondering about Max Schreck, because this person, this guy, we don't know a whole lot about him. And this story is able to thus be twisted a little bit and let your imagination just run wild and have it be okay with the audience. Max Schreck was a mysterious man, and his character was as mysterious as he was. But the film itself is a good watch. I do recommend it. I had fun with it. I think Willem Dafoe won a nomination, or he won an award for the best supporting actor in a film that year, and he deserves it. He doesn't look like Willem Dafoe at all. He looks like a complete different person, a creature that was picked up out of the Germany countryside. I mean, he did an exceptional job. Everything from the movements to the facial expressions felt like you were actually watching Nosferatu acting out the fucking film. It was amazing. It was amazing. I do highly recommend it. I think I would actually place it slightly higher than Murnau's take, simply because of the age. I'm not here to say I don't like watching older movies. I do, but there's just a certain point that they're not as enjoyable. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But I would place this right above the original Nosferatu, and then with the Herzog remake in 1979, taking the prize for probably the best movie in terms of giving us a story about Count Orlok. I'm looking forward to Robert Eggers' take here, coming out Christmas Day. You should go watch it. I think it's going to be worth everybody's time. I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful to watch. I think the set design, the absolute cinematography will be incredible, bar none, some of the best that we will be seeing for the next few years. After watching The Witch, after watching The Lighthouse, I have nothing but the utmost trust in Robert Eggers to deliver on this absolutely beautiful story, one that will live forever in time. It will never be forgotten. I think this is just a must. Every 50 years, we make a remake. It can be the same freaking story. I don't care. Give me your own take if you want, but I will be going regardless to watch that shit. I think that Count Orlok is the most powerful presence in this genre. I think he always will be. His image, his face and appearance are stamped in the halls of horror history for all of eternity. That evil will prevail. It does. And we must battle it as much as we can, but we can also see it and enjoy it on screen. And it's certainly a beautiful story. That is all for episode 33. Thank you for listening. I will be trying to come out with an episode the next month. It's been a little harder lately, but I'm glad I was able to get this out. I was really excited about this movie coming out, and I really do love this overall story. So if you have not invested time within any of these movies, go do it. I think you will be glad that you did. And thank you, as always. Keep watching horror. Thanks again.